probably more important than what it looks like. Okay. Well, there's a lot to talk about. Can't be here for too long because I still have to work later. But a lot to talk about in terms of. Hope I'm not having an echo. I gotta get in here and see. Amber Heard and Johnny Depp. And I'm sure it's being talked about all over the place. I've seen lots of things myself. Okay, I don't know. That would have been helpful. Whoops. Turn that down. Interesting. Okay, so, I hope, yeah, it looks like you can see me fine. I'm far away from the computer. Let me see. The sound is, I think the sound is good. Hopefully there's no echo. And, somebody says, yep. Okay, no echo. Good. Jessica, the trial's making me sick. That I am her and I'll never be able to be loved. I have to go back to work soon, but I will rewatch this. Well, just remember, for people with borderline personality disorder, you're not all the same, and not everybody is the same as Amber Heard. And that's going to be one of my most important messages here today, I think. And Natalia said, Johnny Depp was mistreated by his parents in childhood, has mental and substance issues, even worse, no, not even worse than Amber, but maybe the substance, who knows, abuse. It's not like he's an innocent victim. Well, thank you, Jessica, it's better. Okay. The thing is, I don't know that we need to invoke the word innocent here, but the thing is, what I hope that this unfortunate situation between these two celebrities will do is definitely raise the awareness that men are domestic violence victims as well, and often with women with BPD or NPD, or in the case of Amber Heard, as the clinical psychologist in the trial yesterday said, that she diagnosed Amber Heard with borderline personality disorder and histrionic personality disorder. So I think it's really important to keep in mind that this isn't like, when I heard a little bit more about Johnny Depp's past, and I haven't had a lot of time, I haven't watched much of this trial, just to be really clear about that. But when I heard that he had issues with his mother and difficulty in childhood and trauma in his own childhood, and yes, he's had a lot of substance abuse issues, but it seems to me, just from what I've seen, that he would more fit potentially in a sort of codependent role, and that he probably ended up with Amber Heard. He ended up like so many people do in relationships with people with BPD that don't know that going in. They end up with a version of a cluster B parent. I don't know if his mother's been diagnosed with anything. So the first thing I wanted to talk about here was, oh, thank you, Jessica. And Richard, thank you for your videos. They've helped me too after my breakup. Well, I'm glad. So, yes. I have a few notes here, and I'm just going to read them quickly because I want to be accurate, and then I have the trait list. I wanted to talk a little bit about, this is such a not high production thing going on here, okay? So I'm a Toronto Maple Leaf fan if you don't know. Austin Matthews gets 60 goals, yes. Anyways, must concentrate on what we're doing here. So, people with histrionic personality disorder, because I talk a lot about borderline personality disorder on this channel, and we'll be talking more about it. And not specifically with Amber Heard, because, well, let me put it this way. Clearly, Amber Heard is not, if you look at the subtypes by Theodore Million, which really aren't looked at, I don't think, in clinical perspectives, because they are not, have anything to do with the DSM kind of version explanation of borderline personality disorder. But she would be somewhere between subtypes. She would be self-destructive, and she would be a petulant borderline. So, in other words, a classically acting out borderline, perhaps with some mix of the discouraged borderline, known as the quiet borderline. But I take it she wasn't too quiet with what's been alleged, all of the damage, all of the physicality, all of the abuse, in all different shapes of, all different types of abuse, verbal, emotional, trying to, keep him in spaces he didn't want to be kept in, hitting him. This is all what's been alleged in the trial. So I just want to say people with histrionic personality disorder are usually high functioning both socially and professionally. They usually have good social skills. Of course, they're not all the same, right? And despite trying to use them to manipulate others into making them the center of attention. So people with histrionic personality disorder, and of course Amber Heard got diagnosed with 2 personality disorders, there's a great need to be the center of attention with histrionic personality disorder, as well as borderline personality disorder, and the drivers of each are not exactly the same in the underpinnings of what's going on for people. Usually that goes back to a trauma-based reality in childhood. Not every single time, not 100% of the time, but 85 or more percent of the time. With BPD anyways. So, people with histrionic personality can have good social skills, despite tending to use them to manipulate others into making them the center of attention. I think I already, went over that. Histrionic personality disorder, by the way, I need to mention, which was taken out of the Access to Cluster B area of the DSM for DSM-5. So it's not even in there anymore. So I found it interesting that there was this comorbid or co-occurring dual diagnosis, but that, person saw the person, the psychologist sat with Amber Heard for 15 hours of time to do all that assessment work. HPD may also affect a person's social and romantic relationships and their ability to cope with losses or failures. And I think in Amber Heard we see, from what the testimony has, what's the word I'm looking for, shown us so far, is that she definitely has the fear of abandonment, not wanting him to leave the room. I believe, I haven't seen much of it, but I believe I heard also that there was a big issue with Amber Heard getting very, explosive, I guess, with Johnny Depp for being late coming home at some point. So, it's been rumored and speculated on for a long time online. And I believe that I saw the traits of BPD in Amber Heard when people would bring it up to me, and I would look at it a bit, but I didn't want to say anything. Because it's better to talk about something this high profile when somebody's been diagnosed, and we've seen that, because then it makes it make more sense in some ways, I hope. So I'm just going to run through what histrionic personality disorder is here. And so people with histrionic personality disorder, they often fail to see their own personal situation realistically, so they dramatize and exaggerate their difficulties. And when someone is diagnosed with that with BPD, then there's going to be a lot of those difficulties from borderline personality disorder as well that are going to be exaggerated and highlighted and manipulated about, or cause manipulation to other people. So people with histrionic personality disorder may go through frequent job changes. They become easily bored. They may prefer withdrawing from frustration instead of facing it, or could be the exact opposite, especially when this is a dual diagnosis or comorbid or co-occurring diagnosis with borderline personality disorder. Because they tend to crave novelty and excitement, they may place themselves in risky situations. All these factors may lead to great risk of developing clinical depression, and research, which is always being argued about, by the way. So if I say something on this channel and you wonder, well, what's she talking about? Because I heard this, I heard that. Well, you have to realize that the information sources, the studies, the pioneering clinicians, the researchers, they don't all agree with each other either. So there are many different ways to come at this, and I prefer a psychological perspective within humanistic psychology perspective. So I'm not into demonizing people. Other characteristics of histrionic personality disorder can include exhibitionist behavior, constant seeking of reassurance or approval, excessive sensitivity to criticism or disapproval, pride of own personality and willingness to change, viewing change as a threat, which would only be multiplied with the diagnosis of borderline personality disorder, inappropriately seductive. people with histrionic personality disorder. Appearance or behavior of sexual nature. So a lot of hypersexuality, a lot of sexualizing of situations that wouldn't otherwise be considered that by people without this personality disorder. In HPD, also using factitious somatic symptoms of physical illness or psychological disorders to garner attention, craving attention. People with histrionic personality disorder crave attention in maybe differently motivated ways than people with BPD, but even more for the sake of the attention in a different way than people with BPD. They have a low tolerance for frustration or delayed gratification, which is an overlap with BPD. Rapidly shifting emotional states that may appear superficial or exaggerated to others. Tendency to believe that the relationships are more intimate than they actually are. They make rash decisions often, blame people for their failures and disappointments. They blame everybody else, don't think it has anything to do with them. And people with histrionic personality disorder can be easily influenced by others, especially those who treat them approvingly. I can usually read. Influenced by the suggestion of others quite a bit as well. So now that just lines up with, and I've gone over this before, but let's just look at the 9 traits of borderline personality disorder. Fear of abandonment. I'm not going to go into long explanations because there's so many videos on this channel that do that. Fear of abandonment, unstable relationships, unclear or shifting self-image, impulsive self-destructive behaviors, which can be engaging in harmful, sensational seeking behaviors, especially when they're upset, impulsivity, spending money that they can't afford, binge eating, which can be compulsive overeating, could be like maybe not eating enough. They might shoplift, might engage in substance abuse, all kinds of things that are risky and impulsive because they're trying to get out of their pain, but also because they don't have any regulatory disinhibition. So, and usually executive dysfunction is in that picture. And the 5th trait is self-harm, which varies greatly across the spectrum of people with BPD. Extreme emotional swings, which are basically associated with triggers and usually back to trauma, but not in everybody's case with BPD again. Chronic feelings of emptiness because there isn't a well-known self, unstable sense of self. And people with BPD often feel empty, like there's a hole or a void inside of them. Explosive anger in some people with BPD, not all. Seems like Amber Heard had some explosive anger, so we've been hearing about, allegedly. And then feeling suspicious or out of touch with reality. This is a 9th trait. Not everybody diagnosed with BPD has all of these traits. Some may, but lots don't. And many people never have trait number 9. Just want to say that. People with BPD often struggle with paranoid or suspicious thoughts about others' motives. And when under stress, they may even lose touch with reality, which would be a transient thing, though, not like an everyday thing all day. They don't know what's going on at all. It's an emotional kind of transient state of being triggered, and the repetition compulsion cycles of borderline personality disorder because people aren't always aware of why they're feeling. Like what they're feeling inside is disconnected from the why. And so then the why being largely from the past. When the past gets triggered in the here and now, then often people, especially untreated with BP, are going to go right at the closest person and think they're the one that's causing all the tumult and emotions or the void or the emptiness or whatever's going on inside. So, and people with BPD can dissociate to varying degrees and may feel foggy or spaced out. And yeah, the common co-occurring disorders with borderline personality, bipolar, it's out there, but I think there's issues with that. Depression, substance abuse, eating disorders, anxiety disorders. And and there's a lot said about brain differences, which maybe I'll do in a separate video, etc. But bottom line is that with that, I can unplug that. So we'll just put that over there for now. I've been in the middle of, been in the middle of doing some cleaning up and reorganizing this room. So, it is messy. I don't suppose I need that right now. So, Peter, yes, I agree. Oh, sorry. I'm making up words now. Sorry. Yes, I was as supportive as any partner could be to my ex, even though she constantly degraded and manipulated me and was definitely mentally, emotionally abusive. She discarded me and left me with PTSD. I'm really sorry to hear that, because these relationships are definitely traumatic and traumatizing, and people need their own healing and recovery journeys. And lots of people get into these relationships. More people than not have codependency. And as I talk about on this channel, codependency is a mental health issue. And it missed being codependent personality disorder in the DSM by like, quarter of an inch in the mid 80s. So I don't look at it like a personality disorder, but I think that it bears sort of looking at in that light sometimes, but I'm not interested in pathologizing people. So, and you said anxiety and depression, and went back to her ex 4 days later. Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that, because see, the one thing that I try to do on this channel when I talk about this is to say that not all people with BPD are the same. Or in the case of like Amber Heard, or somebody who would be diagnosed with BPD with histrionic personality disorder, which I don't know that that happens that often, to tell you the truth, but I don't know. That, so I try to make a distinction between the person and the behavior. But when you're in these relationships, it's hard to make that distinction. And when I say that, it doesn't excuse any of their behavior or abuse. And the other thing is, it's not wise to hang around, because you can't rescue them, can't fix them, can't change them, and you can't get them to go to therapy. And even if they're in therapy, there's no saying that they're in the right modality of therapy or what might be most effective for them. The more recommended treatment modalities, which is not just dialectical behavioral therapy, it's also transference-focused psychotherapy, wherein the founders of that, Dr. John Gunderson, really pioneering clinician in borderline personality disorder, and Dr. Frank Yeomans, both psychiatrists that use the words BPD recovery. So, as opposed to remission, as opposed to other narratives. So, on this channel, I don't get into those other narratives as often because I don't agree with them, and lots of people don't agree with them, and lots of professionals don't agree with them. So, there's no settled science in this area, which is unfortunate. And some people believe it is really settled, and other people, and I'm one of them, not so much. Because we continue to see studies out of America and the American Psychiatric Association that are not replicated. So, not that psychiatry or psychology are pure science, but psychiatry in the U.S. is, hegemony with big pharma and other things. But the bottom line is, there's, another fact too, which a lot of people disagree with, but psychiatric medications are contraindicated in the treatment of borderline personality disorder. Now, that depends which camp people are viewing it in, right? Like mental health professionals. Are they in the all, American Psychiatric Association camp or not, right? So, and Jenny, when I heard one of the recordings from past arguments, it reminded me of my ex-BPD. And Johnny had to lock himself in the bathroom, yes, to get away. She couldn't tolerate him not constantly engaging with her. Very true. And no, I'm not. I don't think I'd call this a live reaction because I haven't seen enough of the actual trial to do a live reaction. I just remember hearing, what were there, a couple of those tapes of their arguments that were on their toxic relationship actually unfolding that were on YouTube. They've been on YouTube for quite a while. No, it's not like a reaction to, because I haven't seen enough of the trial. And the psychiatrist that spoke yesterday, it wasn't a psychiatrist, it was a forensic psychologist. Though looked like a rare one, quite bright. I don't think so. I don't think that's the case at all. I think that there's a lot of people just like that forensic psychologist, psychologists, etc., that are equally as equipped to do the job that she did. But I thought, yeah, she was really bright. And I'm still kind of fascinated that she teased out and also put the diagnosis of histrionic personality disorder in there, because uh, it isn't in the DSM anymore, and therefore the conclusion of the American Psychiatric Association in taking that out, it was because the traits of HPD, histrionic personality disorder, overlap greatly with BPD and greatly with NPD. However, that said, that doesn't mean everybody with BPD has um, many, if any, histrionic personality disorder traits, or same with narcissists. So nothing is an across the board blanket thing, and that's what I'm usually trying to talk about on this channel, among other things. And yes, Philip, I totally agree with you what you said there about, big pharma is not, sorry, the panacea that people think it is. But there's been a drive since the early 1990s of the American Psychiatric Association with a hegemony of big pharma to drive this narrative that everything about these personality disorders, or borderline personality disorder, I think they're probably going to get around. They don't pick on NPD as much as BPD, but they're trying to drive it into a known physical kind of like brain anomaly from birth kind of situation, which I frankly don't see the evidence of yet, and I don't believe that that's, I don't know, but I don't believe that. Could there be some heritability? Perhaps, but have they proven anything? No, they haven't. So they still continue to put out their ideology, flawed ideology, that often big pharma funded studies, oh gee, there's no confirmation bias or attempt to run an agenda there, is there? I mean, yes. And one concern I have about all this, well, there's two major ones. One is Amber Heard and that diagnosis, BP and HPD, okay? And then that gives it, hopefully, the hope is more awareness is going to come out about, especially borderline personality disorder and all this. But it doesn't often happen that it goes wider than, on the internet, people that are looking at what is it, because you either have a parent or a sibling, or you've been in a relationship, or you might still be in a relationship with someone with BPD, and you might know it and you might not know it. And then, what other comorbidities are there? What are the overlaps? And so I just want to say again that borderline personality disorder is not this, as a lot of people are forwarding. And I'm just saying, like, what I believe in, what I know based on the research and the information out there, and other people will say different things. But BPD is not a form of narcissistic personality disorder. That's another misnomer out there. Because if it were, why is it that, the American Psychiatric Association, ICD-11, psychiatrists around the world, which has much more effective studies going on in Europe and out of Australia, other areas in the world that are actually being replicated, unlike in America. And so the bottom line is, where do we get the information from, and what do they actually know versus what they don't know? And then what's the agenda with that medication is supposed to be the answer to everything? Because it isn't. So that's just the way I look at it. Oh, hey there, Harper. Nice to see you too. Can't say that to too many people from whence you came, perhaps. But yeah, so just this impromptu, and it's in the middle of the day, so, and I haven't done a live stream on this channel in forever, so there might not be a lot more comments or a lot more that people will say. But something that I find really important to talk about on this channel, and I get it from both sides, right? I mean, primarily I work with people who are, who have been traumatized with somebody with BPD or NPD, or kind of overlappingly, or comorbidity both, or people that aren't sure because people haven't been diagnosed. Because the other thing is patterns, right? Patterns do tell us a lot, but they don't tell us if somebody has BPD or NPD, right? Just the patterns. But for people, if you've got someone in your life with BPD or NPD or histrionic personality disorder, then you're going to be experiencing patterns, and you get online, you learn a lot of information. It just depends who you listen to, where they're coming from with the information. Because like I said, there's no settled science, and I don't know, like, I just do my thing here, but I come from a humanistic psychology perspective, so I go back to sort of like Dr. Thomas Zaz, who I believe was a psychiatrist, but with humanistic psychology, that means that you want to work with clients where they are, and you want to know everything about what they've been through, what they're dealing with now, and not look at them as labels or, but again, and I'm always parsing the difference between, a lot of my videos are explaining the mechanisms of the behavior and why does this happen, why does that happen, so people can start to understand. This is what I do on this channel. And the thing is, nothing I say on this channel is ever to say that people with BPD or NPD or HPD or any combination of things, or people with codependency for that matter, nobody is responsible for anybody else's behavior. And with people with BPD, HPD, maybe co-occurring, comorbid like Amber Heard, for people with NPD or BPD, NPD, their behavior is, a no-go. It's a big red stop sign in relationships of all types. And so if they're not in treatment, then it just becomes a relational impossibility. And I have a lot of videos on this channel about that too. But my number one thing to say is, and it's really important to note, I got an air conditioner in the window here, so getting a few little flies in here. I just want to really note that not all people with BPD, firstly, they're not all women, they're not only women, and they're not all the same. And we see more men with BPD in prison. They get studied more often in prison populations rather than therapeutic settings, and women get studied more with BPD in therapeutic settings, but that doesn't mean there aren't women with BPD in prison. And it doesn't mean that all men with BPD are going to be in prison. So it's like, what I'm always encouraging people to do, and especially clients I work with, is like when they tell me what's happened, what they've been going through, what's going on, along with the patterns that we see on the other side of these relationships, which I think Johnny Depp has talked a lot about. Again, I haven't heard a lot, but what I have heard, very much, I'm sure a lot of people who've been through these kind of relationships, or been with somebody with BPD at least, or suspected BPD and untreated, are definitely going to identify with him. And the other thing is, I really hope that his coming forward and bringing this lawsuit, which I totally understand why he did, because they're both, celebrities. I don't know what Amber Heard's been in or acted in. Or just know she jumped in on the Me Too movement and got some award for that. And she's an abuser. Hello? She was abusing a man. Well, this happens. And this is what the legal system needs to find out more about, and what a lot of society and institutionalized, systemically in society, that men are also victims of domestic violence. And it's not always that it's the other way around. So I think this is what's really important. This is what, it's unfortunate what happened to Johnny Depp and to his reputation, and the smear campaign and the punishment and the revenge that it appears she exacted on him. And then cancel culture steps in because they always think it's always got to be the man. And I don't believe in this case it was the man. And there's so many cases, and I work with so many men and have been for 32 years, where they're not the abusers. And there is such a thing as reactionary abuse, which is not okay either. And that can happen at times. And I don't know if that was the case with Johnny Depp at all. I mean, I haven't heard anything to suggest it was. But when you're getting trapped in rooms, or you have to seek refuge in a bathroom, and then you're not even left alone, well, some people might kind of lose it, and that's not okay. It's abuse too. I'm not saying that he did that. Don't know. But I don't think so, but I don't know. But in terms of physicality, but many people will lose it in terms of what they say verbally. I mean, it's a kind of stress that if people haven't been under it in a relationship, when you're not sure what the heck's going on, And I think that Johnny Depp referenced that, it was almost too good to be true in the beginning. And I hear that all the time from clients as well. And CBT has been a lot more helpful long-term than any of the SSRIs. Yes, well, depending what people are dealing with, cognitive behavioral therapy is kind of underpins many other modalities anyway, and it's very, very helpful. And if anybody is struggling with anxiety, or just some, I don't mean to minimize, but some general things, I don't know, I have the book over here somewhere, I won't be able to find it. Dr. David Burns, and I'm not sure what it's called now because it's had different iterations of. It was published a long time ago and keeps getting updated. I don't see it sitting right here by me right now. The New Mood Therapy was one title for it. But it's like, yeah, there's so many ways when you're working with someone that you can work out almost anything, not everything, but without medication. And CBT is really helpful. So that's the book I'm suggesting for anybody who might be, negative. If you're aware that you have negative core beliefs, if you have generalized anxiety, if you're coming out of these relationships and you're ruminating, don't think that a book is going to help you without seeking help. I mean, by itself. But, just looking at thought distortions and negative core beliefs, and people get into these relationships with people with BPD or NPD or like even HPD, which I didn't think they were diagnosing as much now, but, um, largely because of codependency and largely because of their own family of origin. And not always childhood trauma. Sometimes for people with codependency, it was something that hurt in childhood, but wasn't like totally malicious or like capital T trauma. And this is the new lens, but not brand new lens, of the understanding of what codependency is really about. So codependency is a dysfunctional relationship to and with self, and then a codependent meets a person with, let's say, suspected or who's going to have BPD patterns, whether they're diagnosed or not. And then what happens is that validation from the person with BPD trying to, like, they have you on a pedestal, they're idealizing you, they're mirroring you, and through their codependency, they're trying to people please, and it's all about you. And then the codependent is like, got this thirsting for this, like, validation and maybe just not being seen or heard as a child to one degree or another. And it becomes this trauma bonded situation. And that happens with people with codependency, with people with BPD. It happens with people with codependency with narcissists. It happens with people with BPD and who get in a relationship with narcissists. So it's like, and the dynamics of all of those different types of relationships and then other things I could say aren't all the same, but they are underpinned by a lot of the same motivation for overcompensatory defense mechanism driven kinds of behavior, which then are atrocious. It's atrocious behavior and it's abusive behavior because these people with these diagnoses, right, like the codependents might feel a little bit out of control in a different way. They might seek to control in helpful ways, maybe unconsciously, but it's not the same as the control that people diagnosed with BPD or who need to be or who have NPD. They don't have a self. They're living out of and acting out of a false self. They're still responsible for what they do, and it's not insanity. They commit a crime, they're not going to be able to plead not guilty by reason of insanity. They really are responsible for what they're doing, but they really don't get that once they get into treatment. So, and the other voice is my ex, who had, believe is BPD, contacted me after months, now doing hard drugs, and abusive current boyfriend who was in jail. Needed help and never asked for help, which I gave to her. Well, if you've been watching my channel, you might know. If you're new to the channel, you can look for a playlist on BPD Hoovers, and then people who are the exes, like doing the reverse Hoover, and the stealth social media Hoovers. And that's why no contact is so imperative, especially like if there's children involved, it's different, it's more complicated. But if there's no children involved, people really need to go no contact, and it's much easier said than done. Because when a person that you've been in a relationship with, suspected of, showing the patterns of, or who've been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, when they hoover you, they're always going to tell you what you want to hear. But it isn't going to be true, just like it wasn't true in the first place. So they're always going to be telling you what you want to hear, but why do they hoover you back? Because of their needs, because they need. They don't do it because they're changed, because they're different, because they have something different to offer. So that's why I talk a lot about many videos on this channel, this recycling of relationships and what happens to people and how the cycles just speed up and people end up back in the ground zero agony of trying to survive a BPD or NPD relationship breakup. And he said, so asked for help and you gave her the help, only to ghost me and ran back to him. The warning, no any particular reason, she'd shut me out rather than just be honest. Well, people with BPD have arrested emotional development. This is the explanation, not an excuse, right? It doesn't excuse their behavior. But they have arrested emotional development. So they don't have the ability, unless until treated, well treated, to actually communicate, to actually, be honest. It's very difficult for them because everything is about defending, defending, defending. And from what? From what happened in childhood. But it's omnipresent in the here and now, and they're often consciously not aware of that at all. And again, that doesn't excuse any of their behavior at all. And Philip, yes, it's so frustrating when people refuse to own their own behavior. Exactly. But if you're trying to get a borderline or a narcissist or somebody like Amber Heard, allegedly, with BPD and histrionic personality disorder, if you're trying to get these types of people in cluster B to take personal responsibility, that's almost like a codependent endeavor right there. It really is. It's like, I'm not trying to label, everybody with something, but codependents seek to, fix, to rescue, to make it okay for that person, because you're externalizing out your own repetition compulsions or something from childhood. Trying to make it okay for that person so it'll be okay for you. And that's kind of like self-abandoning you in the meantime, and you can't do that for somebody else. So I think that's another thing that I'm often talking about on this channel. And you can't get them to own their behavior. You just can't. And often these relationship breakups, there's no closure. Whether it's family, whether it's a family member, whether it's a parent, whether it's an adult child, not all people with BPD, some have perceived abandonment versus actual abandonment. But the bottom line is perceived or actual abandonment leads to the same kind of woundedness. So it's not always that parents have done a terrible job of parenting at all, but it is in the vast majority of people that get a cluster B diagnosis, except for antisocial personality disorder, psychopathy, which is very different because it hasn't been established. And I would look up the work of Dr. James Fallon more than anything from the APA, that because the APA right now is trying to recategorize and factor this and factor that, psychopathy and different levels of, I don't know what's going on with all that or how that helps. But the work of Dr. James Fallon definitely comes to the conclusion in a logical fashion, with lots of MRI studies, etc., that psychopaths are born that way. And so never mind the word sociopathy, which is a pet peeve of mine because it's just another word for psychopathy. And then the other thing I just want to say, I'll throw it in here real quick, is so there's lots of professionals and lots of studies out there to indicate that there's this thing called secondary psychopathy in borderline personality disorder. Not really, not proven. I don't think so. Many professionals out there don't think so. And so I don't think so. And why is that? Well, because it's not proven. Again, it's these unreplicated studies of the American Psychiatric Association, which, by the way, they don't let psychiatrists critique or say, critique in an academic or coming with their own study conclusions. There's no dialogue going on, and you don't have science if you don't have replication. We're not talking pure science, but you need replication, you need documentation, and what the APA brings out to the public is flawed ideology, and then they say this is like that. And it isn't necessary, who knows. So this secondary psychopathy idea in BPD is, I think, really wayward, and it's kind of looks to me like, this is just my opinion, that they, rather than get an assessment scale for female psychopathy, for females to be diagnosed when it's applicable with antisocial personality disorder, I don't think that's happening right now. They shove them into the BPD category. And so they're trying to sort of fit everything around that, because the assessment scale for psychopathy is just primarily for males. The same thing with autism spectrum disorder. The assessment tools for discerning autism in people, it's geared toward males, not females. Many females end up not getting the proper diagnosis that would help them to understand their lives and go forward. So, and the other thing I want to just make a point of, which I'm saying on this channel a lot, is So for everyone that comes to my channel, you go watch other channels, you're looking all over the internet, you're reading books, you want to figure out like what's going on here. Is this with this person I don't understand, or it's a relative, or it's a parent? You know, most people are dealing with the untreated or maybe even undiagnosed person with BPD or HPD or you know, narcissistic personality disorder or other issues, right? Because they're not; those aren't all the personality disorders, but there's a lot of focus and a lot of pain and trauma caused by the cluster B personality disorders in particular, even more than cluster A and cluster C for the most part. And so I think that's why we hear so much about it. And Lara, you said, it's been a year since my breakup with someone with BPD. Thanks to your videos, I've been searching out for help. Oh, good. I'm glad the videos are helpful. And yeah, getting your own help is really the way to go forward. And oh, thank you for that. And you said, oh, well, you're very welcome. And Philip, I had a PTSD therapist with BPD that was supposedly subclinical. It was not. I would wake up feeling sick on appointment days and relieved it was over afterwards, but not getting any help for PTSD. Well, I'm sorry to hear that, because if anybody's working with anybody and it doesn't feel like the right fit, you have to, like, if you can talk about it with that person or therapist, it's a good idea. But otherwise, you know, if your gut's telling you something different, then you need to look for somebody else to work with. And you said, I never got checked to even explain the cause of my PTSD. We never even got a chance, sorry. I finally gave up on therapy. The dragon was never going to give up the gold. Gold being EMDR help for my PTSD. Well, just know that there are other therapists out there, and EMDR can be very effective for lots of people, but it isn't for everybody, right? So you might do better in a cognitive behavioral therapy process where it's psychoeducational. I don't know, right? But I would definitely encourage you to try not to give up totally on therapy, because you were obviously working, it sounds like, with a therapist that just, you know, specializes in EMDR. And every client they work with, they do EMDR, which that can help lots of people, but it doesn't help everybody. And it sounds like from the one statement you made there that you really would have appreciated more of a chance to talk. And EMDR isn't really a talk modality or methodology of therapy either. So, but I hope you won't give up on all of the possibilities out there, because you could find a good fit for yourself. Just probably not EMDR therapy, as you're saying. And Peter, I'm glad the trial has brought so much attention to the disorder and the fact men can be abused. Yes, I think that we really need to, long after this is sort of, you know, past and it's over, we need to keep building on that awareness. And that's the thing. That, do you realize that for people that have not encountered somebody with borderline personality disorder that they know of, right? That out there in the world at large, so to speak, it's still just the education isn't happening, you know, in so many of these issues. And also for men, you know, the fact that I don't get this, you know, like I'm not a radical feminist, and I work with a lot of men, so I understand what men are going through, and that there's a men's rights movement and other things and philosophies for men. And all of that is, to me, makes sense. And men need to be heard on a lot of things that feminists, radical feminists, are fighting against. I saw a brief interview on some YouTube channel the other day. I don't know what it was, but I just went by it. And it had to do with, well, it used to be called ICMI, and I was interviewed for that last November. It's on my channel, the two interviews. Well, the interview and the question and answer. But like now that YouTube channel, which doesn't get much traffic at all, like I'm serious, like they got 52 views on all their videos, which isn't helpful to get the message out, is all I'm saying, about men's issues. And now it's been changed because the person who's kind of like in charge of that is somebody from the UK, United Kingdom, well, Britain, I would just say, England, I don't know, who's making a political party to be about, you know, men's rights and justice for boys, which those things are very important. So I think that one of the things that I really, and I haven't had much time to watch this trial, I'm probably going to be looking at it when it's over, like when I get time. But, you know, Johnny Depp might not be perfect, and somebody said they don't think he's like an innocent. Well, but you know, things happen, but in these relationships, when somebody has BPD and she was diagnosed, Amber Heard was diagnosed with BP and NPD, I mean, not BP and NPD, sorry, and BPD and HPD, it's really important to try to have, like, first of all, I think Johnny Depp is very brave man to do this because of the fact that he's a celebrity, because of the fact that this is very difficult for any man in his life to go forward with in court, to be heard, to be understood systemically is still really hard. And it's really my fervent hope that not only that he wins this case, as I believe he should, that's just my opinion, but that I hope it really does do something for systemically, for lawyers and the legal system, and maybe more mental health in other areas in society to understand that this idea of radical left feminism, that it's always the woman getting her, no. And dads are important too. And in these relationships, when there's children, like, so often men have to fight so hard to even get to see their kids. Or they're lucky to get 50-50, but when you get 50-50 custody with an untreated woman with BPD or NPD, is it, you know, we see this going from generation to generation and exploding, these personality disorders. And the APA is trying to say it's genetics. And I'm like, well, I don't know about that. But it's definitely intergenerational trauma. You know, if somebody has a mother with borderline personality disorder, for example, and I understand that Amber Heard has a daughter, 5 times more likely to have BPD. And maybe the APA says that's about heritability, but they don't know that. They can't prove that. I would say that's about lack of nurture and the destruction of a human being at a really young age by not meeting their needs, their survival needs. And you said you was glad a lot of attention being brought to this, and that men can be abused. Actually taking my my ex with BPD to court next week for a protective order because she keeps calling the police on me for no reason. Yeah, I'm really sorry to hear that, and I'm really glad to hear that you are going to go to the court. And I'm sure that you have documentation, right? And you deserve to get a restraining order. And then if the person violates that restraining order, you keep calling the police, and then this is what happens for, not all people with BP will do this, but many do, male or female. What happens is if they can't stop themselves from, showing up at your work, showing up at your home, let alone if you block them so they can't call you or text you or that stuff, then once you get that restraining order in place, obviously when they break the rules again, they get arrested, they get arrested, they get arrested. It gets worse and it gets worse and it gets worse. And some people need that because they're never going to change. And the hope then would be, and people feel guilty often with this, but like people have to work on that part of codependency. It's important to hold them accountable legally in the ways that you can't emotionally, that you can't communicate with them, you can't work out anything with them, or tell them to stop it, or tell them what your boundary is and expect that they're going to respect your boundary, unfortunately. So, but the more that people who can't stop doing this with BPD or BPD, HPD, or NPD, then they end up in jail. And then they end up being remanded to therapy, counseling. And then some will engage and some won't. But the bottom line is you need to do what keeps you secure and gives you peace of mind and gives you a chance to heal and gives you a chance to move on with your life. And so I know a lot of people feel guilty about it, but that's something that people need to overcome in their own healing recovery journeys as well. And Dylan, does having BPD sometimes make the person with BPD ask too many questions or for reassurance on everything? It can do that. It can definitely do that because, for a lot of people with BPD, it's about needing validation, needing reassurance, fear of abandonment comes up in that. So definitely can be, for sure. And you said, past exes, will they leave me, etc. Volatile if don't get the response they want. Yeah, because they're trying to, in a very childlike way, control something and continue to hear something that they think is going to help with what's going on inside of them, that they're not consciously aware of where that's coming from. So they're seeking validation, they're fearing abandonment, But like nobody can keep trying to reassure somebody, because one of the issues in borderline personality disorder for people that aren't treated or significantly treated is just like they have no way to trust people because they don't trust themselves. They don't know self. They don't know the difference between self and other, and you know these relationships are toxic, trauma bonded relationships. Hey there, Pink Diamond. Do borderlines generally bond with their children at all? That's if they are untreated, it would more likely be a trauma bond, but it's not something I can say 100% of people with BPD won't do this or will do that, or but it probably won't rise to a level of. It depends if they've had any treatment or not, but if they haven't, then they're unlikely to be equipped to emotionally give everything that the child might need. So, and if there is some bonding, it's likely going to be really insecure, anxious, avoidant kind of attachment, or it's going to actually be a trauma bond. And that's if someone is parenting and they have BP and they're untreated. So because the child's needs will actually trigger, like a mother with BPD, it will just trigger in them so much that's unresolved from their own childhoods. And then they'll get into these internal states that you may or may not get. They may externalize at some point or not, and people don't know what's going on inside of them, and it doesn't justify their behavior anyway. But I wouldn't say that every single person diagnosed with BP is going to be like, automatically a horrible mother. But because if they get treatment, that really makes a huge difference. So I can't answer that as an across the board kind of answer. And Dylan, kind of think OCD goes with BPD. Well, no. For some people, yes. For everybody, no. So, this is what happens a lot out there. Well, I think this goes with that. And, well, I don't know. Because it could for, like, many people. But it doesn't for everybody. So, oh, thank you, Derek. There's a whole reason to why I'm so far from the computer here. Because I'm making a statement. Thank you. Peter can confirm I feel guilty. Well, that's understandable, and I don't know if you resonate with codependency, because since it's not like a formal diagnosis or whatever, when I speak about codependency and when I work with clients, I sort of look at it like people can have it moderately, significantly, or severely. And that looks different, and that means different things for different people. But the feeling guilty is likely really tied to something that goes back to family of origin and that wounded inner child that on this channel I'm always talking about quite a bit. Because your guilt, Peter, is toxic guilt, not healthy guilt. So you will benefit if you're not getting any, therapy or help right now with getting into a healing recovery journey, so that you can work through where's that coming from and why are you feeling that way when you have every right to take care of yourself. This is the thing about codependency, is that people don't have a healthy and functional relationship to self, and that's from childhood and various different situations and iterations of kind of woundedness. It doesn't always have to be major trauma. And so people with codependency have learned, been kind of inculcated and trained as children they've either been parentified, there can be emotional incest, which is parentification really, it's like, or infantilization, but it's the parent using the child to regulate their emotions or to help them with what they need. It's like role reversal. Very damaging for kids. It's not always the way that codependency comes about, but often what I've seen in clients, I've been working with for 32 years, thousands of people, is definitely, getting into the work and figuring out where the root of things like toxic guilt and toxic shame versus, and shame wounds come from when it's a codependent picture and people don't have a personality disorder. And I'm rooting for Toronto, can you tell? I'm going to get my heart broken again, I know, because they haven't won a first round, playoff round in I don't know how long. And the last time they won the Stanley Cup, I'm 64 right now, I was 9 years old. So figure out how many years that is, right? But we got to hope, but we doubt it. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, This is what I threw on today. um, Philip, the quote specialist unquote told me anyone else I went to would be the same. I'm really sorry to hear that because that's not accurate. And I shouldn't venture this opinion, but it sounds like somebody who really was applying unethical pressure to you, basically in maybe a passive aggressive way, to get you to keep coming to them to pay them. Because the thing is, you gotta, if you don't have what a client needs, and you need to help the client figure out what they need and where they might go to find that. So I'm really sorry to hear that. And you said I'm looking to into finding a competent therapist. So hopefully most therapists do not behave like an unpredictable, confused minefield. Well, yes, that would be the hope for sure. And I think there are some out there like that, and definitely I'm sorry like for what you encountered. But so you have to be careful. You really do. You have to make sure that the fit is right for you, and that you can feel safe with the therapist that you're working with, and that you feel heard and seen. And sometimes, like when I'm working with clients, sometimes I might be doing a little bit of psychoeducation, but in response to what clients are asking. But basically, I believe in the egalitarian process of, you know, horizontal relating, not vertical. And a lot of it sounds like the therapist you had, a lot of people can be like up here thinking, well, you're the one with the problem and you're down there. No, it should be like a horizontal relating, egalitarian, like when I'm working with clients, I'm there to help them. I'm not there to tell them what the problem is or even tell them what the solution is. It's the process. And for that process to work, there has to be a safe, trusting, environment and relationship within boundaries created there that isn't a personal relationship, obviously. And let me see, where was I here? And James, hey there. Said you're looking healthy. God bless. God bless you. Love your channel. Well, thank you for that, James. And I don't know if you're still thinking about working with me, but you asked a question on a comment yesterday, and if anybody does resonate with me, does want to work with me, you can just go to ajmahar.ca and you can check it out. Derek, why do some relationships with people with BP last long and some are so short? Mine lasted 7 weeks, and her new relationship has lasted over 6 months. I'm confused. Yeah, it's such a question that a lot of people ask, and people are hurting and confused about that. And I think there can be several reasons for that, but so sometimes a relationship lasts longer, and then sometimes they're short. I think it just depends on what triggers them. And it doesn't mean that the next person isn't triggering them too. It just, the intensity factor, and that doesn't mean it's your fault or anything, it's what they're carrying around inside of them, all these live wire triggers, so to speak. And then it depends on the type, but then that wouldn't explain when they change, because like from being in a relationship that's longer to then maybe a series of shorter ones. But I think the other explanation for that, generally speaking, is that people are probably coming up against more and more triggers and more stuff going on inside they don't understand. And the other thing I would say, which I don't like to really harp on too much, is that sometimes when untreated people with BPD find a narcissist, not the only reason, but sometimes that can be a reason why things last longer, because that's a whole other dynamic. It's a trauma bond, it's toxic. But whether there can be other reasons too. So, and it's highly individual. But I know, like I've had so many clients say to me, well, now my ex has been with this person, or she was with the last person for 7 years, and we were only together for 4 months. What's wrong with me? What didn't I do? Well, it's not about you. It's not about the person who's been in the relationship and then you're now trying to survive the BP relationship breakup. It's about the person with BPD or suspected BPD, what their patterns, and they can be in more self-destructive, more devolving patterns as things go forward in their lives, because they're going around these circles. And then if they do start therapy, things can even increase in the beginning of that too, because they get so emotionally dysregulated, they're being triggered so much. They don't often, before treatment and significant treatment, won't be aware of what's triggering them. So it can be, that somebody who's been in longer term relationships then that aren't going to be healthy, or it's still going to be like all this roller coaster riding, walking on eggshell stuff, then get into a series of like they're devolving and their patterns that are speeding up and triggers and things, the repetition compulsion cycles that they're not consciously aware of, and then they'll go shorter, 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 and then there can be people that just jump back and forth and it doesn't seem to make any sense. But the number one thing I can say about that, because I can't really get into all the specifics because each person with BPD isn't the same, or we look at types, subtypes, severity, it's got nothing to do with the person, like yourself in this case. It's got nothing to do with the person who was in the relationship that was shorter or longer. The other person isn't better. And so people get into this really painful comparative narrative, and it's really important to try to work on that and getting out of that as well, because that becomes a big piece of rumination. And so, when I work with clients, I can sometimes explain it better because I'll find out more. But just right now, I'm sorry, it's just the best answer I can give in a vague kind of way. And Dylan said, yeah, I'm going to stop asking for reassurance because it's driving my love interest away. I think I do struggle to differentiate. There's some notification on my thing. Sorry. To differentiate between self and other. As if someone leaves me, I still feel cheated. Yeah, well, and I hope you're in your own therapy process as well. And something for people with BPD to consider, especially if you're in therapy and you're fairly aware, is, are relationships really, realistic for you right now? Or would you benefit from not being in a relationship for a while, which is really difficult in many different ways, taking that to your therapy as well, working on that, getting through your own healing process further before being in a relationship. These are just things that people have to think about. Might help people to think about. And Philip, the having to walk on eggshells and never knowing when they're going to blow up you, but going to, I guess, blow up on you, it's not therapeutic at all. Well, no, and it's not healthy, and you can't change, fix, or rescue them. Following those appointments, I would have the worst migraines of my life. Wow, if you're saying that a therapist was like that, that's even worse. Sorry to hear that. Really sorry. Your thoughts on the reason the BPD self-sabotages? Well, that goes really deep into, depending on what, perceived or actual abandonment, which is about 87%, is actual, and the causative factors, it depends which school of this you ascribe to, but bottom line is it's emotional arrested development, and they're self-sabotaging because they have a big core shame wound in early childhood, which when anybody is shamed enough in childhood, some people with codependency have a big shame wound too, but they don't have BPD. A child hears, I am bad, not I did something bad. So no matter the presentation, the overcompensatory defense mechanism strategies people with BPD will use, they look like they're narcissists or they're full of themselves or whatever the case. It's basically their self-sabotage is coming from lack of self, lack of known self, the pain and or void, whatever they're feeling, that they don't know where it's coming from, and they feel horrible about themselves. They hate themselves. More people with BPD hate themselves than anything else. And let me just say too, narcissists don't love themselves. This idea that the myth of Narcissus was accurate is ridiculous, because they also have self-loathing and self-hatred that they will be happy to, whether they're aware of or not, project all over you. So the self-destruction in BPD comes from almost zero worth, lack of self, what happened in childhood that's being repeated over and over, because they in their own desperate, unknowing, not conscious ways are looking to, for the partner, looking to a partner or the favorite person for identity. And they're looking for you to help them. And then you just become object other parent representation of either the good parent never had an idealization or the wounding parent. And then in devaluation. So and their self-destructive nature is because they don't know self and they can't trust others. And if you don't know the difference between yourself and somebody else, it's broken mutuality, right? Because you don't get your needs met. You're not allowed to have any needs. They have all the needs, and you can never satiate those needs. So these relationships are impossible. And their self-sabotage is driven by how bad they feel about themselves and by what happened to them, usually the trauma in childhood, which is, I think, 71 to 85% of people diagnosed with BPD report traumatic histories in childhood. And you said, is it like, is it like in internal family systems, the father and mother in their head? I don't want to park it with internal family systems necessary, but yes, they are relating to everyone else in their life or any partner at any given time or favorite person as like unconsciously as if it were the parent. So they're always relating to other as parent, emotionally speaking. Obviously not in the IQ area, but in emotional dysregulation for sure. Philip, yeah, the initial therapist who sent me to the, quote, specialist, unquote, was very kind. She actually asked questions and allowed me to be safe to answer. I thought the specialist was going to be just as competent. Well, yeah, and unfortunately, I'm really sorry to hear what you went through because, it's injurious, right? On top, it's not helpful. It's hurting you more. And then if some people, when that happens to them, they don't continue therapy at all, and it's hard to trust the next therapist. So, I'm really sorry to hear that. And the protector in their heads wants them to fail. Well, that's the false self, and it's those, what Freud described. It's those repetition compulsion cycles deep within the unconscious. The only way they know how to relate to other, they don't know really the difference between self and other. But when they're trying to relate to other people, they're still relating from that young, lost self, wounded place of what they need from a parent. So that's why in my videos on this channel, people that might be new here or people that have watched my videos, people with BPD untreated don't attach to you, don't know how to love in a healthy, congruent, age-appropriate, consistent, mutual, or reciprocal way. And I put all that verbiage in there so that people with BPD don't come like screaming at me like some will anyway. They're like, I cancel love. And well, a lot of treatment is needed for that. So, it's not really that the protector in their head wants them to fail. It's the repetition compulsion patterns of the core, the surface content of the woundedness. It just keeps getting replayed out over and over and over and over and over ad infinitum unless they get into therapy and really start to engage it to whatever modality to be able to learn about the triggers, learn about what happened, learn about how they're reacting, learn about how they're affecting other people, and then beginning the process of healing to change all of that, which is why Dr. John Gunderson is quoted as saying that for BPD recovery, which is very possible, which again is controversial because a lot of people think it isn't, and it's, quote, the remission nonsense of the APA. Well, there's different schools of thought on this. But the bottom line is, Dr. John Gunderson says that recovery from borderline personality disorder, that's right, people can recover, takes 8 to 16 years. So it's nothing that any codependent should hang around trying to get, make the relationship work again with that person. So, and when I say that, and I don't usually talk about on this channel, are there some people with BP that are further along in treatment that there might be some way? Well, very few. And so I don't want to put that out there as false hope for people, because if they're not in therapy or they're in therapy, so many people with BPD will also go to therapy that has nothing to do with helping them with BPD. They just get their suffering witness, they just complain about you or the relationship like it's all your fault. And so just the mere fact of them going to therapy doesn't guarantee anything either. And Peter said that makes sense. The ex she went back to, from what everyone has told me, and the relationship was very toxic. Yes, and it's not always the only reason, but it is one really core, often seen reason, dynamic, because often, and not always, but more often than not, lots of people with BPD, male or female, if they are in that sort of pattern with a narcissist, going back, etc., but then they may well have had a narcissistic parent. And the other thing is, I've heard it said out there that borderlines will devour narcissists. No, it's kind of the other way around, but they damage each other in very unique ways because they keep triggering each other's core content, woundedness, tremendous woundedness, to put it mildly. And so those are horribly, that's like a trauma bond on steroids is what it is. So they sometimes can last longer, but it's not something that you'd want to be a part of to have it last longer. I see a big yellow thing popped up on my screen. I don't know what that means. And Philip, reading Albert Ellis has been helpful with comparison anxiety. So that's interesting. There's lots of different reasons for anxiety, and Ellis is a good source for understanding that. So is Hans Selye. The reality that we need anxiety to even live, but not excessive anxiety. There's healthy anxiety. And Richard, do you know how my BPD ex would think of me? I ended the relationship, and some say they devalue you. Meanwhile, others believe you are missed till they find somebody else. Again, it's really hard to be able to say because it's so individual. And some people with BPD might be having ideas of reference isn't really the right term. Oh, the yellow bar went away, so maybe we're okay. I was going to have to go over to the computer. Where was I? You ended the reading. How they think about you. Well, it's highly individual. And for some people, BP, they're not thinking about you at all. And then I would ask you this question, and especially if it resonates with codependents. When in the relationship were they ever thinking about you? Like, look back at it now. It might have seemed like it at the time, but when in the relationship were they ever thinking about you? So are they thinking about you right now or not? Well, if they are, it's probably in it's all your fault, blame you mode, which isn't accurate. And also, they will still be experiencing or thinking about you as a devalued object of the wounding parent. So it really isn't even about you. It really isn't even about you. And as I say that, I know that it is your pain, and you're the one that was traumatized. But again, it's important to realize it's not as much about you as they make it seem, right? Because they're externalizing everything out and blaming everybody else. So I don't know. Some people with BP might have a sense of missing people. I think a lot of people don't. And again, untreated, it's really hard to say. Some just go to out of sight, out of mind. Some may fluctuate back and forth between a horrible person did all this to me, which doesn't mean you are, and then sometimes maybe wanting you back, right? Which wouldn't be good for you. So that's why no contact is so important. And I would also say to you, Richard, it's important to try. It's difficult, but if you're wondering and asking the question, you might be ruminating on the question, what is my ex thinking about me? And that is a codependent externalization out of how you might feel like you did something wrong, like it was your fault. Toxic guilt again. When really, the key thing there would be to get into healing recovery journey, working with someone, to be able to see where that really comes from childhood. So it's not helpful for you to keep thinking about what's she thinking about you. Or what is that ex thinking about you? Because it's not going to be helpful content one way or the other. You know what I mean? Girl interrupted. They didn't even mention narcissism in this trial. And you said shake my head. Well, there's a good reason for that. Good, excellent reason for that. And that is what is not well enough delineated, I don't know about everywhere, but out there, that BPD is a distinct diagnosis with a distinct flavor of issues and traits and problems with communication, behavior, relationships, and a whole bunch of things that go with it. And there is some, I don't like using the word, but there is some pathological narcissism within borderline personality disorder. It doesn't rise to the same level as narcissistic personality disorder. So I think a lot of people out there think, no, this behavior has got to be a narcissist, right? But no, often not. And that's what gets separated out, like by that psychologist who spent 15 hours with Amber Heard. And there are clear categorical reasons why there are these different personality disorder categories with different traits. And I don't think that forensic psychologist missed anything. And you said, sorry for butting in here, AJ, do you think Amber has also narcissism along with the two other? No. Like I said, there's some unhealthy narcissism within borderline personality disorder. And I'm pretty sure the forensic psychologist in 15 hours would have not made that kind of an error. So again, it's the public's idea. Because narcissistic personality disorder isn't as prevalent as people think it is. And borderline personality disorder might be getting more prevalent, not as prevalent as people think it is. And so you can see a lot of toxic behavior in people, and you might think it's this, that, the other thing, but in a clinical assessment, and that forensic psychologist spending 15 hours with Amber Heard in this case, no. I mean, there's clear, identifiable reasons and differences between borderline personality disorder and narcissistic personality disorder. And again, I want to stress that people with borderline personality disorder, the more severe it is, untreated, will have some overlapping. Doesn't mean they have NPD or traits of NPD, but there is unhealthy or pathological narcissism to a certain level, varying in people who are diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. So, and Philip, 8 years is a long time. Definitely. And X Running, thank you for your thoughts. Oh, you're very welcome. And so I'm just aware that I got to get going in the next, 5 or 10 minutes. And I just wanted to say again that I really hope that, so I'm not here to do a breakdown of the whole thing or anything. That's what I was trying to stop from happening. But I did want to say that I really hope it will raise awareness, and that there are a lot of people out there who see this happening in this trial and heard the tapes, and they're celebrities and automatically jump to what they think it is. But no disrespect to anybody, but people need to understand more about the delineations to be able to appreciate why Amber Heard didn't get a diagnosis of narcissistic personality disorder, and why it wouldn't fit for her, as the forensic psychologist came to that conclusion. So, and Richard, thank you for that. I'm definitely codependent and have some attachment issues. And let me just say, codependents do have attachment issues, but the whole aspect of what codependency really is and means in your life, and what you need to get into a healing recovery process for, isn't all predicated on your attachment style. I think it's really important for people to know that, because some people that work specifically in attachment, they think the codependency isn't even anything because it's just an attachment style. And so be careful of that, because codependency is more than what one's attachment style might be. But that's in there too. And you said, and you were curious because in a month I've had to see her for graduation at school for about 3 days, and I'm not ready. Well, and that's really hard, because you might not be able to be ready, but I think what's key there is to maintain the no contact. And that's going to feel really hard to impossible, depending, but you need to not get into a conversation. You need to not recontact that could affect things going forward, because it's not in your best interest to do so. But it's very difficult, having said that. Um, and Girl Interrupted. Okay, you're right. I just fear how people are going to paint all borderlines with the same brush in. You know what, Girl Interrupted? I totally hear you on that. And on my channel, I'm going to be doing more on this because, like, there are certain words on this channel that are not allowed. That I saw, there's a YouTuber that I watch once in a blue moon, but I like watching her. She does all kinds of different issues. And, you know, big YouTuber, I don't know, like maybe, well, over 500,000 viewers, doesn't matter, but like she's interesting. And she was talking about Depp and you know, Johnny Depp and Amber Heard. And, you know, she was using this word that starts with S that I'm not even going to say here, referring to Amber Heard, and I'm like, yeah, here we go. Here we go with the more pathologizing of BPD, with they're all evil, they're all this, they're all that. I abhor that. And I hear you about that because it shouldn't be happening to people with BPD or to people with NPD. Though when people are really hurt by them and they are traumatized by them, often it's hard for them not to get in these really, you know, extreme kind of places. And of course, some of what the internet supports around that isn't helpful, right? I don't believe. But, and I think for people with BPD, it's really just important to keep being on your journey and, you know, hopefully in therapy and to keep doing the best you can. But I hear you, Girl Interrupted, because it's a concern of mine too, and it's happening already. You know, a lot of videos I've just seen a few of. I'm sure in a plethora of videos out there about this. There's going to be more, you know, because Amber Heard's behavior is not the same as all people with BPD, but is inexcusable and abusive, and there's no excuse for abuse. But everybody with BPD isn't the same, so I try to say that here as often as I can, and I really feel what you're saying, and I really hear you, and it's gonna have that fallout too. So I can only do what I can do on my little channel here to try to keep telling people that people with BPD aren't all the same, and that there's a reason why they're in the pain they're in, and the behavior for many with BPD, not all, and especially untreated versus getting, you know, some treatment and moving forward in therapy, can be really indefensible. But separating the person out from the behavior, though that doesn't mean people should stay in abusive situations. But I hear you on that. I totally do. And hey there, Ellie. How you doing? Yeah, how about seeing me, and there isn't all of me, that there was, like, I don't know how long ago, like over a year and something ago, that people out there, so, you know, they're saying I'm 500 pounds, I'm 700 pounds. Nope, 192 pounds. So I'm not a skinny legend, but hey. Anyway, good to see you, Ellie. And you said I've been keeping up with the Johnny Depp and Amber Heard case, and she definitely exhibits borderline behavior, but I also find a lot of her behavior seem very narcissistic as well. Aha! But that goes to what people really need to learn more about and understand more about, that for severe borderline personality disorder, there's pathological narcissism and behavior that will look similar. That's where they say there's overlap between BP and NPD in some cases, in some people more than others. It doesn't mean that the person doesn't have borderline personality disorder. It's not the same as narcissistic personality disorder. So can there be some narcissistic behaviors in severe BPD presentations? Yes. Does it make them narcissists? No. So I think it's important for people to keep in mind. And again, not all people with BPD are the same at all. And the constant needing to record every second of the relationship. Yes, she was doing that out of a need for control, fear of abandonment. You know, it's not okay. But and her inability to trust. You know, so, and I'm sure other reasons as well. Interrupted. What is the behavior in histrionic personality disorder? Well, if you go back to the beginning of the stream, I kind of outlined the traits of it, and some of the behavior kind of overlaps and looks a little similar to behavior in many with BPD, but not all. But so yeah, if you listen back to the stream, I talked about that at the beginning or somewhere nearer to the beginning. And again, there is some trait overlap between histrionic personality disorder and borderline personality disorder, between histrionic personality disorder and narcissistic personality disorder. So much so, I'm kind of surprised at this diagnosis, but the lady's obviously clearly you know, brilliant at what she does. I kind of am shocked that she included histrionic personality disorder because it's been taken out of DSM-5. It's no longer in cluster B axis 2. It's just sort of floating in the air. Like, it still exists, but I don't think it's diagnosed very often. So, but there are some people with BP who are going to have a lot of the histrionic personality disorder traits, or coexisting, I guess. Or same with some narcissists, very histrionic narcissists, very histrionic people with BPD. Not all, but some. So, and again, I wouldn't think it would be the majority either. And Allie, laugh out loud, that's okay, AJ. It's so good to see you regardless. Yeah, but I'm just saying there's a whole lot less in me, right? But you know what I'm talking about, Allie, right? You know the reason why I had to sit here and do this way, right? But we won't mention that. Crazy stuff. Girl interrupted. She has both, so that may make more sense. Well, yeah, and the diagnosis of histrionic personality disorder would definitely make the presentation and the behaviors within BPD stronger, more severe, and worse, generally speaking. And I definitely agree. I can see where it can get hard to tell the difference from an outside view. Well, it does. And a lot of people these days, I mean, I was listening to something else earlier, and you know, maybe they were goofing around in the beginning, but they actually said narcissistic personality disorder culture. There's no such thing. We live in narcissistic times. We live in narcissistic culture, but that's not pronouncing everybody a narcissist. So what is narcissistic personality disorder when professionals have to clinically delineate that, assess and diagnose that, versus today it's just commonplace parlance for people to go, well, that person just brushed me off, so they must be narcissistic. And we do have narcissistic culture, but it doesn't mean that everybody in that culture is a narcissist. So, tricky word use, I would say. But it has meaning, but it doesn't mean, like, narcissistic culture doesn't mean narcissistic personality disorder. So when they said narcissistic personality disorder culture, I was like, but anyway, maybe they corrected it. I don't know. I didn't watch. I'm going to watch that video when I have time. I don't know when that'll be. But they may have corrected that. They may have changed the way they were talking about that. Oh, that actually shocked me a bit for some stupid reason. I got to get going in a couple minutes. Girl Interrupted said, everyone is a mixed bag because everyone is a unique individual. That's true, but not everyone is going to be a mixed bag of a whole bunch of things just because they're unique and their individuality, right? Again, this is where the delineations in, you know, with like diagnosing psychologists and psychiatrists are so important, as opposed to what people on the internet generally just let point, and this is that, and that's that, and that's the other thing. And Ellie, do you think they got rid of histrionic disorder because it's too similar to both disorders? That was the reasoning, yes. And it makes sense in a way, but then it doesn't make sense totally because not all people with BPD or NPD are going to have histrionic traits, or many of them, or enough of them to say that they're a histrionic borderline or a histrionic narcissist. So to me, it didn't make sense. But if people remember, what was it, back in 2013, DSM-5 came out. It keeps getting messier every iteration. But they were going to take narcissistic personality disorder out of cluster B. And instead, they ended up pulling histrionic personality disorder. Don't ask me why, I don't have a clue. And it'd be interesting to see if they're going to do the 6. The next one, it looks like it's going to be an absolute mess. So, because remember, in my opinion, what I say on this channel, is the American Psychiatric Association is about pathologizing people. They don't seem to be much about the solutions, just the constant pathologizing. And there are studies like, oh, now it's this is this, and that's that, and that's that, and that's that. Where's the proof? Right? Like, I know people think I'm an old lady because I'm older, but I'm not all the way older yet. But like that lady that I was, with that commercial for the restaurant I don't want to mention, where's the beef? That's what I say to the American Psychiatric Association. You got all these studies, you got all this information, and you know what I forgot to say before when I got into like the idea of secondary psychopathy and BPD and what that's one central study about all that. Go watch Dr. Fox's video on that because he did it so well. I don't think there's any need for me to try to do it. And what was his conclusion at the end of his video? Borderline personality disorder and antisocial personality disorder are two distinct disorders, which I've also seen in research studies. And Dr. Joel Paris, who I don't like at all, out of McGill University in Montreal, Quebec, Canada, also a study that said that BPD and antisocial personality disorder are two distinct disorders. So there's a lot of that out there, but there's reporting that somehow they're not. So again, there's all this arguing going on among all these researchers and pioneering clinicians, and then what people hear first on the internet tends to be what they want to believe, and it's like, why? So I forgot to finish that sentence a long time ago. And Allie, yes, we won't. No, we won't. I absolutely won't. You know why, Allie? Because when people aren't listening to you, you need to back up. And I'm not name calling here when I say this, but no pearls before swine. Not calling anybody that, just saying. That's the saying. So if people aren't listening, they can't hear you, then you need to back up and stop talking. And that's empowerment. And that's what I chose to do. The girl interrupted, I have BPD, but definitely not histrionic at all. I don't like a lot of attention. Well, I totally hear you, because you are you, and you are an individual with BPD, as you've said. And yeah, not everybody's the same. And Gee, hey there. Love your works with love from Israel. Wow, thank you. And love back at you. And with that, I got to get going because I have a client. Yes, in 6 minutes. So I really wanted to get something on the record here. I hadn't done a live stream in a long time on this channel. There'll be more coming. And there was a purpose and a reason for needing to set things up this way today, which maybe won't always be the case because you can see me from here up again, but it doesn't mean that there's a whole lot else going on down here. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, that's just my own thing. I'm not, not vain about that at all or anything, but just, stuff spreading around on the internet, like there always has been and there always will be. So, yeah, and just one real quickie at the end here, because there's this 2018 Reddit thread that I've seen and I've heard a lot about in the past, where somebody says, first of all, I didn't declare myself cured from BPD. I recovered from it in 15 years worth of therapy. I was part of a study, etc., etc. But people can believe what they want. And the second thing is, so that Reddit thread, which is written by who knows who, just people talking, right, says that I said, which I never did say, let me put on the record, I never said that I couldn't be in a relationship because it would trigger my BPD that I recovered from. So I'm just putting that on the record here. People can think whatever they want, I don't care. But I am in a relationship. And anybody that's watched this channel over time, or if you look at videos over time, I've been in relationships because I've been recovered from BPD since for 34 years. And does that make me perfect? No. Can I get a little angry about something? Can I make a mistake over something? Sure. And then everybody says, oh, see, it's not recovered from BPD. Dichotomous, black and white, ridiculous thinking. So anyway, enough about that. And Allie said, okay, good day, AJ. It was nice to see you, and can't wait to see more videos. Yeah, well, thanks for popping by, and thank you to everybody that came by. Impromptu. And, hey, I like the way the live streams roll over here because, yeah, they're usually just not that busy, which is actually a good thing, I think. So, anyway, thank everybody that came by. And if you're listening to the replay, I hope you might find something helpful in this. And again, I just want to reiterate that my hope is that Johnny Depp gets justice, number one, that men are also victims, often many men are victims of domestic violence that's perpetrated by women, It's not just the other way around. We know that it happens to a lot of women as well, by men. But then if you think about gay-male relationships, there's a lot of domestic violence, man on man, mano on mano. And in lesbian relationships, there can be domestic violence, woman on woman. So this is not a gender-based reality. And I hope that Johnny Depp gets justice. This is my opinion now, only, right? And I hope also that it really does have a lasting awareness effect and impact on systemic legal institutions and others that don't realize that it's not just women that are victims of men, but men are also victims of women, and we need to care about both. And we need to be able to recognize that. And, Johnny Depp gets barred from working or loses so many roles, becomes persona non grata based on this woman's opinion, and look what's coming out now. And that's classic, not for everybody, but borderline personality disorder, punishment, revenge, vindictiveness, and smear campaign on a mass scale because they are celebrities. But let me just say, this happens to people who might live in a small town, and maybe they have a very prominent business where there isn't a lot of competition in a certain area of business. I've had clients with these issues, and the smear campaign happens, and the man goes through on a different level, but similar to what Johnny Depp's gone through. They can lose their businesses, they can lose customers, clients, money, be damaged in all kinds of ways, and of course, emotionally, psychologically, is huge, right? But all these other things matter in people's lives too. So I hope that's going to raise awareness to that, and I hope that with Amber Heard and what that forensic psychologist diagnosed her with, BPD and histrionic personality disorder, isn't going to continue the narrative that's so hard to fight against online of not only stigmatizing, but making all people with BPD seem like they're monsters. And people with BPD aren't monsters, and I'm not here to defend Amber Heard or her actions or her abusive behavior or anything of the sort. But I'm here to say that, monstrous behavior doesn't for a monster make. So, again, but she's totally responsible for what it seems and is coming out that allegedly she's done. And so I hope that, my fear is that it's going to stigmatize BPD a whole lot worse. But my hope is some education and awareness can come out of that regardless. And like I said, I hope Johnny Depp wins because he deserves justice. And I hope that that will really help a lot of other men. And Daniel, I saw my ex-BPD in a pub last week, making, you've been no contact for 5 months. She seems very angry with 2 mutual friends, and approached and talked with them, and she didn't even look at me. And I'm sorry to hear that, because she could be doing a bit of a smear campaign on you for sure. Yes, and Girl Interrupted said justice for Johnny. Johnny Depp is a class act. I believe so. I mean, he's had his issues, substances, etc., but everybody around him in his life has always said he's a peaceful man. So, I mean, they would know, right? And Amber's an extreme form of both disorders, in your opinion, Girl Interrupted. Yes, and I would say that's probably pretty true. So with that, thank you all for coming by. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. And stay tuned for what's coming next, you never know. And there's over 900, almost 920 videos on this website channel, if you care to look into different things. And there is a playlist, I think it's called AJ Mahari on I'm sorry for the name, on BPD for borderlines. So I haven't done videos that recently, but there is a playlist in there for people with BPD. If you want to hear more what I'm talking about there, as opposed to when I'm talking about people that have been hurt by people with BPD or NPD, but I'm still trying to be respectful to say that not all people are the same, etc., etc. And I'm sorry I can't pronounce your name. You said, just found your channel. Thank you so much for your videos. Well, you're very welcome, and I'm sorry I can't pronounce your name, but I hope you subscribe, and I hope that you'll find my videos helpful. And everybody take care, and to end this live stream. Pardon me. I'll have to walk over to the computer to do so. So yeah, with that, everybody take care. Sorry if I'm too up in your face now. And yeah, I'll be doing lives again. I'll still be doing videos. And I'm out here to work with people that I resonate with. Everybody take care.